Hey everybody, it's Rod with Van Guns coming back at ya with another video. Well, I suppose that some of you were waiting, wondering, when's he going to do it? He has to do it. He's a boomer. He can't help himself. He's going to do it. Well, today's the day. I just can't help myself. We're doing this. So yes, it was inevitable. Baby boomers got to do what baby boomers do. Talk about the 1911, the 45 ACP. Look at the size of that hole. Guys, I'm a very young baby boomer, and I understand all the excitement and craze they used to have about 45 ACP, but I also understand why 45 isn't all it's cracked up to be by older people. The older generation just remembers it from the days when bullets really didn't move very fast. And that goes way back, long before baby boomers were around. It goes back to the black powder days. And firearms just couldn't move projectiles nearly as fast as we can move them today. Smokeless powder really changed firearms forever. And the 45 ACP, despite being newer than the 9mm, was an old school way of thinking, whereas the 9mm was a progressive new way of thinking. And so the 45 was big, fat, juicy projectile, humming along at 800 feet per second. Whereas Luger, who invented the 9mm, his attitude was, no, we're going to take a 125 grain projectile. Actually, back then it was a 115 grain projectile, and we're going to whiz that thing along supersonic at 1100 feet per second. And the net result was a lighter weight cartridge with less recoil, and in some cases more capacity, and about the same amount of actual energy. Back in 1904, when the 45 ACP first launched, it only had about a 20-pound advantage, 20 foot-pounds of energy advantage over the 9mm. Back-to-back World War champ. We're not wrong. I mean, it was true. This is back-to-back World War champs. Can't take that away from them. Hey, I'm interrupting here real quick. I want to talk a little bit about the 45 ACP and its place in the modern cartridge scene. 9mm and 40 Smith & Wesson are very comparable cartridges, 9 being a little less potent than the 45, and 40 S&W being pretty much on par, maybe a little more powerful. But these are really the cartridges to compare to 45 ACP. I really wish people would stop comparing 45 ACP to 10 mil. I mean, that's like, really? No. The 10 mil is much more powerful. And a pumped up 45 ACP plus P plus super plus Underwood Buffalo Bore only gets to be about standard pressure 10. So stop doing that. These are the cartridges that really are worthy of comparison with regards to the 45 ACP, and I thought I would take a minute to kind of really go over the numbers because boomers still out there, older boomers than me, blabbering on about the power of the 45. It is a little overrated, if we're honest. Okay, here looking at the chart, we're going to start up at the top with the original loads. Keep in mind the 45 ACP was replacing the 38 Long Colt, which was a revolver cartridge, very weak sauce, as you can see, more like a 380 today. And so they really needed to make an upgrade. And 9mm would have been a great upgrade from 38 Long Colt as well. But the feds wanted a 45 caliber, and they got it. You'll notice that back in those days, 45 and 9 were really close on power. Energy difference of less than 10%, closer to 5% difference. But the expansion, all they had was lead nose bullets, lead round nose. And those didn't expand a whole lot. The 9mm got a little bit of an edge on expansion because it was moving faster. But neither one of them really expanded a lot. And the 45 was just a way bigger hole. And look at the penetration.
230 grains carries a lot more momentum than 116 grains. So that's kind of why the 45 was sort of the king. It kind of kicked the 9's butt for the technology that we had at the time. Later on, in the 80s, we started coming out with exotic bullets, and that really started to help the 9. It helped the 45 as well, but it definitely helped the 9 more. Okay, so I'm not going to belabor this chart too much longer here. You'll see that the 45 consistently outperforms the 9 all the way down. It absolutely crushes and destroys all contenders in subsonic, and that's because it's a natively subsonic round, so it's basically making full power subsonic, and you can even use plus P and still stay subsonic. So if you want a subsonic round, it's all about that 45 ACP. You'll see that the 40 S&W is really the king here of these 3 cartridges. If you want to just kick a 9's butt, get a 40 S&W. You don't have to go to 10 to beat up on the 9. But the 45 is just a little bit better. It still has better penetration and a bigger hole, but the 9mm with their high velocity tend to create an equivalent wound channel to 45 in this modern era, which they did not do, back in the day. And that's a relatively new thing, the last 35 years that we've developed that. So understand this is why baby boomers, older boomers than me, that still stick by that 45 is king, because, for a real long time it was.
Back-to-back World War champ.
And, if we're really honest about it, the 9mm in the German Luger was back-to-back World War losers. If we're honest.
I want to talk about the 1911 and why it's still a really cool gun to have. But there's a couple of things about the 1911 that are just enduring. The shape. Look at that thing. What a beautiful shape this gun. Now, I have Batman grips on mine. It's kind of silly, because anyone who knows anything about Batman knows he doesn't carry a gun. But I like the Batman grips. I thought that was fun. I got about 5 different sets of grips for this gun. But look at the shape of the gun. It's still got one of the best triggers in all of semi-automatic pistols. The 1911 trigger is to die for. This is a single action only pistol. You probably already knew that. And there are advantages and disadvantages to single action triggers. Typically, back before the 2011 came out, a lot of guys were winning competitions with 1911s because that trigger is just so good. And so it's slim. Again, it's a 45 caliber gun, so it's going to be thicker than a 9mm. This is a full-size pistol, guys. It's an all-steel gun. This thing weighs like 45 ounces. It's heavy. That's a 5-inch barrel. It's a full-size gun. If this is comparable to a Glock 17, and I think we all know that a Glock 17 easily holds 17 rounds flush, and then they've got even longer magazines that can put even more in there. So 9mm is going to just kill it in the capacity. So I've never been a fan of the takedown of these things. Kind of a pain in the butt. Not going to go into it on this video. There are a ton of videos that'll show you how to take down a 45. It's not hard. It's just tedious. Modern pistols take down so much better. The lore of the 45 is still alive and well, and it's just a beautiful gun to shoot. There's something to be said for big, heavy projectile, slow moving, very effective at knockdown. Not necessarily super at bullet expansion. It doesn't do any of the modern things in firearms ballistics particularly well. It just does an adequate job. And so if you want to use a 1911 as your home defense weapon, your nightstand gun, it's not a bad choice. I just think there's better choices. I still think this is one of the sexiest guns out there. Just the way it looks, the way it feels, it's fairly well balanced. I think the commander length, that's the one with a 4-inch barrel instead of a 5-inch, takes a little bit of the nose heaviness of the full size out. And honestly, one of these days I'm going to get a commander 45. I have shot them, and I kind of like the balance a little better on those. But the 5-inch barrel, these things are really accurate. But the 45 is still an effective cartridge. It's been surpassed. I don't fancy much getting a 1911 chambered in 9mm. They make them. I might get one chambered in 10. If I'm going to carry a heavy all-steel gun and I'm not going to use the original 45, I'd like a little more power. Give me a 10 mil. And you can get these in 10 mil. So you get kind of the, I don't know, the nostalgia, if you will, of using an old gun and an old design, but with a much more potent cartridge in 10 millimeter. And there's plenty of companies that will sell you a 1911 in 10 mil. Okay, a lot of them do. This one, by the way, what I'm using here, you might be wondering, this is actually not an expensive gun. It's made by Metro Arms in the Philippines. It's called the American Classic. It's got all the goodies that the skeletonized hammer, the skeletonized trigger, the front and rear serrations, modern sights. I mean, this is a nice gun. It shoots great. I've never had a problem with this gun. Full disclosure, I probably put a couple hundred rounds through it, though, is all I've done. So it's not like I've really pounded this pistol. But I love the gun. I think this is an amazing pistol, and it had a major impact on the firearms industry, its reputation, its extreme longevity. They still make these things, and people still buy them. Back-to-back World War over 100 years after it came out, and in spite of more modern pistols that in many ways are better. It's one of those old school designs and old school guns that just probably will never die. I'm not going to tell you that this is the end-all be-all pistol like older boomers do, because it isn't, but it's a great pistol, and you really ought to, go shoot one, go rent one down at the range. You'll probably want to buy one. I mean, they're just, that trigger alone, oh my God, the trigger's amazing. So there you have it, the 1911. Fantastic pistol. You knew as a boomer I had to do a video on the 1911. I just had to. But there's a million videos on the 1911. I got to tell you, the last time I had a 1911 on my nightstand as my bump in the night gun was the kind of the late 90s. At that point, I was more into double action, single action pistols like the Beretta 92, the Beretta 96, the SIG P220. I've got one of those. In many ways, those are just better guns. And so I hope that was helpful to you. And we'll see you in the next video right here on Van Guns. Look at the size of that hole.